Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1, and we're back, Julie. It is May the 19th. We're picking up where we left off yesterday, the day before, and the day before.
Indeed, this is part 4
of the housing. Is the housing crash coming soon? And what we're doing today, and what we've done the previous shows with the same title, if you want to go back and listen to them, is we are creating our evidence, or I would not necessarily say evidence. Let's just say our preponderance of proof.
Yes,
how about that?
Our findings.
Yes, that there is no housing crash looming. And there's no housing crash looming as in this year, next year, maybe the year after that, or, and this is hard to believe, but maybe ever. And what we're experiencing now in pricing with regards to homes is possibly just a new hard reset, and everything's going to start from here. In other words, there's not going to be a precipitous drop in price. There's just going to be a building on the prices for the, at least the next 3 to 5 years. And we were not originally of that opinion. 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, we saw reasons to believe that there was going to be a potential slowdown that wasn't going to be, that was going to cause some markets to take a step back. But because of a whole bunch of things that have happened since then, and some of them were certainly fueled by COVID. And what we're going to talk with you today is something that certainly I think was fueled by largely by COVID. You're not going to see a slowdown in housing prices. And now why are we telling you all this? And by the way, we are not necessarily housing cheerleaders like some of you I'm sure are going to want to label us. We are agent cheerleaders. We're in the business of helping real estate professionals. That is our primary focus. And guess what? You can make money helping people in real estate no matter what direction the market is going, whether it's going up, in favor of sellers, down in favor of buyers. It doesn't matter. So please don't think that you can only be successful when the market is going one direction. So what we're going to be talking to you about today is probably, in my opinion, following, I'd say demographics is #1 reason that there's not going to be a housing crash. And we talked about that yesterday. But this next bit that Julie prepared for us today is perhaps even more significant or equally as significant as the actual demographic shifts that are going on. And by the way, have you noticed that Julie and I did not say that the housing market right now is predicated, and the continuation of the seller's market is predicated on low interest rates, because it's not. And that's the thing a lot of people are confused about. They're thinking that as soon as interest rates go up, the market's going to slow down. This is not going to happen because of what we're going to share with you today and what we've shared with you the previous 3 shows.
Yeah, and Tim, the amazing thing is that there's not just one reason why the housing market is not going to crash anytime soon. And,
exactly.
I got several questions in our Facebook Live session yesterday for our Premier Coaching members. And it went something like this: I can't believe what I'm having to do on my buyer contracts. How long am I going to have to deal with this? And so, you can appreciate them asking, because it's frustrating to be on the buyer side, and the buyer side commissions are eroding and all the rest of the things we've talked about on previous podcasts. But, for the foreseeable future, get used to it. And I think part of the reason that we believe that is because it's not just one reason. If you could say, well, this is just because of that, and when that goes away, then we'll be fine. But it's not. This is a 4-part podcast series about it.
Julie just said something. I hope you guys are paying attention to it. Now, we always have to remember that our audience, because it's so large, is diverse. Some of you have been in the business forever. Others of you are not even yet licensed. But here's the thing. Generally speaking, it's easy to attribute the reason that something's appreciating. Let's just say housing is appreciating. You'll have, like when Julie and I sold real estate, we never sold real estate in a really hot seller's market, but there were seller's markets inside the market in which we sold on a grander scale in Columbus, Ohio. There were certain markets that were doing incredibly well, but when you were to sort of, I wonder why that market's doing fairly well, it's easier to figure it out. Well, it was an area that was being populated now by a bunch of folks that were moving here because they were working at a new headquarters that had just opened up in this part of town, that kind of thing, right? So it was easy to sort of point one thing points to the other. It wasn't real convoluted. It wasn't because there were all these dynamic forces from demographics and interest rates and all the rest of it. It's because people needed a place to live, right? So it's easy to kind of predict what direction markets are going to go based on whether or not there's people that are moving there to work nearby and all the rest of it. What we're experiencing now, is so much more dynamic and has so many more moving parts that I think, when you read what people are predicting and what they're basing their predictions on, they're basing their predictions on what happened leading up to the housing crash. They're not taking into consideration, and I was reading a bunch of articles on Inman about this, and the people that were pontificating about why there's going to be a housing crash, they completely and totally were missing the boat about 90% of the reason why there won't be. They're only focusing on like a few, 10% of why there might
pricing
be.
trends and things like
Well,
that.
exactly.
Yeah, well, there's more to the picture. So, for example, our topic today is all about working virtually and migration. It's the state-to-state migration is one of the factors.
It's macro housing trends and macro also, I would say, lifestyle trends.
Indeed. So point number one, the virtual workplace, the new normal. The pandemic strapped rocket boosters to a trend that was already happening, which is called work from home. What used to be a rather unusual request for most became required in 2020 on into 2021. This means that freedom meant opportunity to live where you wish, and that working from home or remotely has become normal. Choice of urban, suburban, or rural is now a reality, whereas before it seemed a necessity for many to be in a city environment. So from RIS Media, quote, according to a December 2020 Pew Research Center survey, 20% of respondents reported they worked from home prior to the pandemic, but this jumped to 71% as of December, with 54% saying that they would prefer to continue work from home after the coronavirus outbreak ends.
Let's hover there.
That's different than before.
So the trend was already headed in that direction slowly,
Yes.
right? So maybe it would have taken another 10 or 20 years to make it to the point where people were and employers were willing to accept that working from home was as effective as working from everyone being in one location. But the coronavirus completely changed all of that. And now that the genie's out of the bottle, and now that people know that they can be and oftentimes more effective working remotely, and all this technology, I mean Zoom and Verbella and all these other amazing companies, which were there, but they were maturing slowly. All of a sudden, they had all this massive growth inside 24 months. That momentum is not going to slow down, and all of a sudden, there's so many more attributes and benefits to working remotely from a personal perspective. And so, we're looking for staff. We're looking to hire people, and we're virtual. Our coaching company is virtual. We have employees literally all over the world, or staff, I should say, because they're all contractors. But the reality of it is that trend is not going to reverse. It's not like all of a sudden people have been working from home, being efficient for the last 2 years, are all of a sudden going to say, well, okay, I guess it's time to go back to work. And employers, here's really the finer point, are now advertising, saying that you're going to, I would say 80% or 90% of the people that are running ads looking for employees that are, say, white collar type jobs are leading the description of the job with work virtually.
Yes, that's right. And it's giving people a lot more opportunity. I think of just like something simple like, Zoe's part-time nanny. She also is a remote paralegal for a company and does a bunch of other things. Why? Because she has the freedom to do that. She gets her work done remotely and isn't subject to the 9 to 5 thing. So point number 2, change of priorities. And I'm going to do a whole podcast on this because there's new language that's coming out.
Yeah.
Search terms have changed to things like 1 acre or more, near parks, best connectivity, swimming pool, walking paths, large backyard. One of our clients in Paducah, Kentucky reports on this, that her most popular searches that she sees on her tracking are 2 to 5 acres and things like that are kind of out in the country, but not too far out in the country.
Right.
Still has connectivity. You're not really taking care of a farm, but you're having your privacy.
Well, speaking of connectivity, that's the other thing that's right now in the process of changing. Even where we live, where the connectivity is kind of terrible.
Generally, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of terrible where we live here in Puerto Rico. But Elon Musk to the rescue and Starlink. We talked about this on our podcast before, but just Google Starlink. Long story short, high-speed upload and download internet's going to be available to basically everyone on planet Earth, assuming that this master plan of Elon's to have the world covered with these microsatellites. And that's going to be something that's going to provide a sea change to not just where people live, but how we communicate, the rate in which we are going to expect to respond to people, the rate in which we're going to companies are going to be expected to, essentially provide customer services, answers to questions, and all the rest of it. So you could be living in your RV in the middle of, wherever, and you can actually have a high-speed Starlink satellite, a little satellite, they're like 8 inches, a little dish that's going to sit on top of your RV or whatever, and you can work remotely, and you can do your Zooms, and you can do whatever the heck else you're expected to do, and while you're fishing. I mean, that's kind of where we're kind of going with regards to
freedom meets opportunity.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. And again, you can have that level of freedom and not take a pay cut. That's the thing that people are, wrapping their minds around. And employers are not being able to pay less just because someone wants to be remote.
That's right. So the next thing is the types of homes that people are searching for. Many people are now looking for 2 offices, a dedicated homeschool space, an in-law suite, etc. A lot of the searches I hear from our coaching clients are a lot big enough to put a second home on, or
right.
a home office pod or a homeschool pod type of structure. And there's a lot of companies that are coming out with that type of office space too.
I think actually, I didn't tell you this, but eXp Realty. By the way, if you guys want to talk to us about eXp Realty, yes, of course, we'd love to sponsor you at eXp Realty. Yes, of course, Julie and I would be honored if you were to give us the opportunity to sponsor you at eXp Realty. Just text me directly at 512-758-0206. 512-758-0206. Just text me. Well, eXp has got, I believe it was on their store, a company that makes small, it looks like a small, micro home type deal, but what it really is, basically it's a fancy shed, if I want to call it.
But it's like a mini office.
It's a mini office with air conditioning, with heat,
cool.
with built-in desks, with, and the walls are sound insulated, so you could be working in there. And they've got windows on 2 sides, and you have window coverings, and the whole thing is really kind of very cool.
Well, Zoe tells me one of her friends has one of those in their backyard that their parents built for homeschool purposes. So there's lots of different trends and opportunities. I think that's really cool. I got to look that up on eXp's site.
Yep.
Let's see. So types of homes. Again, people are looking for places to do what we just talked about. New terms have been invented, like the cloffice. That's an office made out of a closet. Okay. Multi-generational homes have become hot. 7-bedroom houses, flexible floor plans, room for an additional home on the same lot. People are relocating to be closer to elderly relatives and grandkids. Family came into focus in the pandemic, and that has largely changed people's trends and fueled more buyers in the market.
People underestimate how much people's psychology around what you just read has changed. And I go back to your grandma, to be honest with you. And I go back to when you and I, her name was Minnie Foltz, and her husband's name was Alan Foltz. And I remember when Julie and I went over to their house when we were married, so we were out of college, right?
We were probably 20-something.
Yeah, so I remember going over to our house when they were trying to basically get the house cleaned up so that they could, move on to a smaller house and the whole thing. And I'll never forget all the neatly organized piles of everything. Not just to call her a hoarder would not be appropriate. But because everything was organized, but she had rubber band balls that were bigger than basketballs. I mean, she had saved everything. And now you ask yourself, well, why? And when Julie and I sold real estate, we'd seen other people that were saving the same thing. It's because after the Great Depression, when there was a massive scarcity of everything, people in that generation essentially had their brains rewired, and their brains were rewired to save, never to basically waste, to save everything, because rubber bands and maybe, newspapers, and she saved mason jars and all kinds of things. All those things had value because there was scarcity. If you went to the grocery store and you wanted to buy a mason jar, let alone a rubber band, back in the Great Depression, good luck. A, there was no store, and B, if it was open, they probably had 1 can of tuna. You guys get the point? So the moral of the story is that behavior or that experience changed her, but then it got passed to Julie's mom, Janet. And guess who else? Julie. Julie definitely collects stuff too. And where did she learn it? She learned it from her mom. And her mom learned it. She learned it from Minnie. You guys get the point? All of this is generational. And so what we've experienced now is not just going to go away because we don't have to wear masks anymore. This is going to be passed from generation to generation to generation, and all kinds of good and bad things. But the obvious good thing is people are going to, A, they're going to have shown themselves to be more resilient than they thought. But B, it also is going to be the expectation of how they're going to live their lives, the expectation of where they're going to live their lives.
That's going to live on for sure.
That's going to live on for sure, and that is not going to change. That is a long time socioeconomic, demographic, I don't know of all the graphic terms other than that, but that's going to forever change essentially people how they live, their lifestyle.
Well, here's some facts for you. Point number 4. Here are the stats. According to move.org, 33% of people who moved in 2020 stated that they had not been planning to move. 45% report their decision was definitely COVID-19 related, and 38% stayed within the same state or region but still moved. So there's a lot of people studying this migration trend, and 38% stayed you might have lived in Columbus, but now you've moved out to, remote Delaware County. So you're in your region, but you still had the same reasons. And the rest of the percent moved out of state, and we'll talk about that in a second. So point number 5, some of the biggest changes, this is from Bloomberg, the regions around San Francisco and San Jose, 2 of the country's most expensive housing markets, saw the rates of permanent moves increase the most by more than 23% and 17% respectively, compared to 3% nationally.
As in moving out.
Moving out permanently.
Yep.
Some of these economists are tracking temporary moves, and they do that based on people's mail forwarding and stuff like that.
Right. It was pretty funny, Julie, that when this was actually starting, this has been happening for a long time, especially, you didn't mention New York, but this has been happening for a long time in New York. And during the pandemic, you're about to get to it. But when this was starting to happen, all the politicians there were saying, oh, no, they're just going up to their summer homes.
I know.
It's just temporary.
Well, there was some of that, but
they were just trying to gloss over maybe their sort of bad decision-making and the effect it was having on people's confidence in their ability to live there.
Ask people in Austin what they think about that.
They all moved to Austin.
Exactly.
They moved to Austin and Florida.
Well, so in New York, the popular pre-pandemic journey from Manhattan to Brooklyn, for example, remained high on the list. But urban dwellers also moved outward, with the close-in suburbs of Westchester County and Suffolk County in Long Island being some of the most popular destinations for Manhattanites. For people who left the central New York metro area entirely, Miami was indeed a popular destination.
But interestingly enough, because we have a ton of EXP people in our revenue share group at EXP and coaching clients down in Miami, the condos in Miami are definitely a buyer's market. So if you want to buy in Miami and you're wanting to live in a tall building and that maybe has sort of a remote glimpse of the ocean, guess what? That's Miami's your place. But guess what? You can't get, or hard to get, single family homes. And it was shocking because Miami's market was all about these big fancy towers, and those towers in Miami are extraordinary. And, you had some of the biggest designers in the world and the biggest brands in the world. They're amazing. There was a Porsche building where you could literally, you pulled in this huge building, you pull your car up to this little, garage portal thing, and then it takes you in your car on this remote, this ride up this massive building in this glass elevator.
Car elevator.
And your car is parked, it sounds cool.
I know. Are you not allowed to ride it if you don't have a Porsche, though?
I don't know. Well, I'm thinking when you're up there, how do you know? What happens if you don't leave it in park? I don't know. The ramifications are bad. Exactly. But anyway, the moral of the story is those buildings now are a buyer's market. And I'm not saying they're anything bad, just saying that people are not preferring to buy them over single-family homes.
Well, and that's an example of a place that's not as hot as the rest of the country in terms of, appreciation and all that. So, okay, migration to lower tax states. That's point number 6. For states with the lowest taxes, an average of 4 people moved in from other parts of the country for every 1 person who left over the last 8 years, according to a new report from Redfin. The trend has reversed in high tax states, where an average of 2.5 people left for every 1 person who moved in. For example, Nevada, Florida, South Carolina, and Texas are prime examples of low tax states that are attracting new residents. Nevada gained more residents than any other state over the last 8 years. For every 9 people who moved to Nevada from 2013 to 2020, just 1 person left, and it's the 6th lowest tax rate in the country. 1 in 5 home buyers now cite lower state taxes as their motivation to move. In Texas, Apple and Google, that should have said Tesla. Sorry, that was a typo from autocorrect. Tesla, Apple, and Google have all moved from California to Texas. Austin is one of the fastest growing cities in the country.
People talk about those big companies or the big sort of like flash companies that everyone knows about, but Oracle moved. And there's a billion other companies that basically have moved or are moving to Texas in particular. Yep. But again, we were Austonians for a while. Basically, we lived in Georgetown. And the trend towards California, people migrating to Texas was already going on. It's been going on for a long time. But this basically sped things up. And then obviously you had the California taxes that went up. And the taxes are going to continue to go up. So open your eyes here, folks. All we're trying to tell you is the long-term trends are your friend, as long as you're not thinking it's going to be some sort of short-term aberration. This is a long-term trend. You're going to see more migration. Once people move and their friends move and their kids move and their kids are settled back in schools, then they have new doctors and vets and all the rest of it, they tend to not move. They tend to stay put. And you're going to see these trends continue. If nothing else, they're going to pick up momentum over the next probably 3 to 5 years. So if you're in one of the markets that's gaining residents, well, then you're going to be on the right side of appreciation or inflation. If you're one of those on the wrong side, you better be minding the store and looking to see where the actual macro trends and micro trends are in your individual market, or you could very well be caught living in an area where it's going to be super hard to sell a house. Now, not saying you won't be able to help people make money, just pointing out it's a simple fact. You got to decide what you want your business to be like. And Julie and I, when we sold real estate, we experienced that too. We had, we were selling in, basically 6 different areas, and we were in New Albany was a great example. When we moved to New Albany Country Club area, it was really hot. It was real, things were selling like hotcakes. But we moved there about the same time that the market started to reverse. And then you started seeing more expireds. And then you started seeing essentially all the ramifications of an overbuilt, overpriced market. And we did great. I mean, we did fantastic because we were very efficient at price reductions and working with expireds and dealing with, Dr. Filling, cranky sellers, the whole thing. That's where we, essentially sharpened our axe. And when we were working our way up into the upper markets, we had worked in normal price markets. And you guys can survive and thrive as well. So please don't convince yourself that you can only survive or thrive in one type of market. You can do well in any kind of market. And I'll say that the hardest time, but also the best time to be in real estate is during a transitional market. So if you're in a market, in a little micro market that's transitioning from a seller's market down to a buyer's market, don't just wimp out. In some cases, that's where you can make the most amount of money helping the most people.
That's right. You just have to change your skills and your scripts and your expectations. When our market changed in New Albany, it went from things being pretty fast and furious. I remember waiting lists to build and stuff like that.
They were doing lotteries for lots.
Sure. And then it became, if it doesn't sell after, back then it was maybe 30 days or so, we would look at a price adjustment. And there was no expectation of multiple offers.
Nope.
So things change. You change with the times. Okay, so again, I will conclude with there's just not just one reason that the housing market isn't about to crash. There are many. This has been part 4 of our series. So if you missed the previous 3, get caught up to speed. We started the series last Friday. So that's basically my summary.
Yeah. So bottom line, guys, is that we are in a long-term generational shift, and really this will rattle a lot of your cages. And did mine when I had this little thought. What if what we're experiencing now in the country and a lot of places in the world as well, what if this is the new normal as far as where pricing is going to be? What if there is going to be no slide back in values? What if this is what houses are going to cost and only going up from here forever?
That is what I would expect, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely.
You have to revamp your mindset if you're thinking otherwise. And be careful what you're sharing with your clients and prospects, because remember that Google search was up 2,700% of is there going to be a housing crash? So it is on people's minds. And our whole impetus for doing this podcast series was to give you the actual facts so you can have intelligent discussions about why it is still a good time to be in the market.
So tomorrow we're going to be talking about the effects of inflation on housing. So make sure you tune in then, because that's going to be perhaps one of the most interesting and no longer controversial topics that Julie and I have been talking about for years with regards to in the coming waves of inflation. But now we're seeing evidence from across the board in all meaningful ways that the inflation that's going to be felt by everyone in the United States, especially when it comes to housing prices, is going to really shock a lot of people, because things are going to get almost seemingly overnight. Things are going to get substantially more expensive. And it's not just housing, it's going to be everything. So we're going to share with you what's going to happen next, the effects of inflation specifically on housing, and what you can be doing to prepare not just yourself, but your client. So in the meantime, guys, if you want to talk with Julie and I or have any suggestions for podcasts, or if you want to talk with Julie and I about joining our EXP group, please feel free to text me directly at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206. In the meantime, you guys have a fantastic day, and we'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows, and until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.